Happy Monday, all you minties. Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for your advanced look at the Captain Mar-Vell, or Captain Marvel, whatever you want to call him, Volume 1 Omnibus from Marvel Comics. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, before getting started, a huge thank you to David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advanced copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on January 31st or February 1st, depending on where you get your books. What we're looking at here, though, is the standard edition cover. This is the one by Gil Kane that will be available everywhere. On the left-hand side is your direct market cover. That one supplied by the legendary Gene Colan. And if you see the difference in the spine, there is a difference in the spines. But everything else will be identical underneath the dust jacket. So we will shift the focus back to this book right here. The sensational new Captain Marvel, Unchained. And there we have Bucky for some reason. Why is Bucky on the cover? Well, there were some things that were going to change for the character of Mar-Vell. There we have Captain America. I love the fact that we still have the issue number 17 with the October date coming out. Marvel Comics group up there. And let's look at the spine. So the spine does have one of the new designs. It's got the tiny font, smaller font. Can't see font because my eyes are getting older font, as people call it. Or maybe that's just me. Definitely these. Woo, I need my progressives on. I think that's what they're called. No. Readers. They're still called readers. Thomas, Drake, Colin, Heck, Kane, Starlin. Still got it. Volume 1, here is the image of Captain Marvel with another change. And then the back of the book. From the original Captain Marvel to Thanos, cornerstones of the Marvel Cosmic Universe debut in this out-of-this-world omnibus. Heck of a blurb. And down here is what's collected. Here are the covers and the ISBN with rated T for teen. Feel like a video game commercial. ISBN is $100. Now, on my videos, I started doing hey, you can fast forward to the non-spoilery side of things if you want to. I will put timestamps in the description when the minor spoilers start. But that's basically showing off the artwork while talking about some minor spoilers. Pretty much the premise and the pitch for what Captain Marvel is. Alright, but before we open it up, let's look underneath the dust jacket. We have the Captain Marvel logo right there. And let's look at the spine. That is the spine that we get on the dust jacket. And speaking of dust jacket, here is what you're going to find on the French flaps. No, just flaps. So over here are the creators of all the people that helped put this book together. And then up here, Cosmic Adventure lands in the Marvel Universe. A little behind the scenes as to who the character of Mar-Vell is. And on the back of the book is, of course, the symbol of Captain Marvel. Now, he doesn't get the symbol until Roy Thomas and Gil Kane take over the book, but we are going to talk about the 3 different type of eras in this particular omnibus, a little behind-the-scenes history as to how this came about. If you're familiar with the character of Captain Marvel already, you know the guy. Shazam! That guy! Yeah. Just a little bit of brief history, and then, of course, showcase the book and internal artwork. Now, because of minor spoilers, even looking through some of the pictures, even though these stories are from the 60s, early 70s, still I don't want to mess up anything or ruin anybody's first time reading experience, so jump ahead where I talk about the quality of the book and the build of it. Alright, so let's do this thing. Now before cracking it open, I forgot to mention that it feels so great to have this cosmic era this year alone, this 70s, late 60s era, the Silver Age era of Marvel Cosmic starting to be collected for the first time in omnibus format. We've had things like the Thanos omnibus and the Guardians of the Galaxy omnibus, and of course the Fantastic Four and some of the Silver Surfer stuff, but this is expanding on the Marvel Cosmic side of things in omnibus format, and I love it. I love that we're getting Marvel this year, we're getting Nova this year, we are going to get the Warlock omnibus. It just makes me happy that people that love these stories from their childhood can now go back and revisit them in what is my favorite format to read these stories in. Alright, so let's go ahead and crack this sucker open. So, scooting it over here, I have some black end paper. The way that I remember Captain Mar-Vell looking, because that's the way that I read him first in the pages of the first Mar-Vell graphic novel, which is not collected in here. His original appearance, so that symbol doesn't really start until issue number 1617, when, like I said, Roy Thomas and Gil Kane take over the book. Speaking of Roy Thomas and Gil Kane, here are your main contributors to this particular omnibus. Volume 1. That's right, there's enough for a Volume 2. I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second, or in a little bit. So you have creators in here besides Roy Thomas and Gil Kane, like Arnold Drake, Jim Starlin, a very young Jim Starlin. Actually, most of these folks were young during this particular time. Gene Colan, Don Heck, and again, Jim Starlin just wanted to do it all. But one thing that I've noticed right away, besides some of this amazing inks by Frank Giacoia and Vince Colletta, but right here is the gentleman Dave Cockrum, who was the inker for issue number 26. Of course, he went on to do grander things with my favorite merry band of mutants. The letters, the colorists, the editors, and of course the collection edition stuff here, and including the color restoration. And special thanks. I love when they do that, like when people scan like original artwork for Mar-Vell. I think it's great that they give them props, and rightly so. All right, table of contents and where you're going to find each issue, when each issue was coming out. So one thing you're going to notice that I said there were 3 different eras collected in here, and the book was canceled a couple of times. So you'll see, for example, in between issues 19, I believe, 19 to 20, it goes from December 1969, which was a monthly title, to June of 1970. And then canceled again in issue 21, so it goes from August of 1970 to September of 1972. Just bad luck, bad timing, and they needed to revamp the series. 3 introductions by comics history major Roy Thomas, a phenomenal voice that we are still blessed to have with us. If that man could write an introduction to everything Marvel and DC, when DC starts collecting a lot of these books from the Bronze, Silver Age, that would be so amazing. While he's still with us, we need to give him the praise that he rightly deserves. Alright, so here we have Marvel Superheroes, which was a rebrand of another failed book, monthly series, but Marvel Superheroes number 12, featuring the first appearance of Captain Mar-Vell. So this is a very interesting story. So I'll talk a little bit about the history behind the Captain Mar-Vell. And you may have seen the character, of course, from the Distinguished Competition that turns from Billy Batson to Captain Mar-Vell. And he had his own title. Now, that before DC, though, that character was created by Fawcett Comics. And, of course, whenever I did my Marvel Man, Miracle Man Omnibus overview, I talked a little bit about that history, how DC went after Fawcett Comics because they thought that the character of Captain Mar-Vell had a lot of similarities to the character of Superman. So that's what ended up happening. They went after them, and Fawcett went bankrupt. They lost the rights to Captain Mar-Vell. Now, DC ended up absorbing the character of Captain Mar-Vell and all the Marvel family, so Mary Marvel and all those characters. But the brand and the copyright to the name Captain Mar-Vell was just out there after the late 60s. Or actually after 1965. So the gentleman that was the publisher of Marvel Comics at the time decided, hey, we're Marvel Comics, we're rebranding ourselves. Let's go ahead and take that copyright from a small publisher known as MF Enterprises, who a few months before the debut of Marvel's own Captain Mar-Vell, it came out and only did like 6 issues, I think. And it was an obscure character that could, like, his limbs could come apart and go after people, and then with a certain phrase, his limbs could come back. So they wanted the rights, and they did it through the court system and ended up buying the rights from them. It's all in the introduction. Like, Roy Thomas has this memory. Now, he doesn't remember real important small details, like how much they paid or who settled out of court, but it's all in there. And it's an interesting side of things that I didn't know about. I mean, I knew about the whole lawsuit between DC and Fawcett. I just thought the deal was between Marvel and DC when it came to the title Captain Mar-Vell. So there was a deal that was worked out eventually, where DC could still use the character Captain Mar-Vell as long as the magazine, as long as the comic book was not titled Captain Mar-Vell, but the characters inside of the book could still be named Captain Mar-Vell. Hence, we have books like Shazam or The Power of Shazam. So Martin approached Stan Lee, and Stan Lee was like, I don't want to write that. That's ridiculous. But Stan Lee, being the guy that he was, decided to write it and got Gene Colan to draw it and create the character of Captain Mar-Vell. So that's where the credits go. It's Stan Lee, Gene Colan, and then Frank Giacoia doing the inks for this series. So here we are introduced to the character in the Marvel Superheroes 12. Now, this also collects issue number 13 of that series, and then the guy got so big, he got his own ongoing series. So Captain Mar-Vell 1 through 33 are all in here. Iron Man number 55, which is a big, important first appearance of some characters that play an important part in Captain Mar-Vell's life. And then material from Not Brand number 9, which is a funny story. Like, how in the world they got away with it, I don't know. This book has 888 pages. Now, let's talk a little bit about the history of Captain Mar-Vell, the fictional character. So this guy right here, this gentleman, is a Kree warrior, who was a race that was introduced in the pages of the Fantastic Four. So he is coming to spy on Earth because of his Kree superior, the Colonel, who plays an important part in all this too. And he is coming to Earth to spy on it, but ends up falling in love with it. He decides to take up a Earth name, Walter Lawson. Now, he doesn't use that very long, but he uses that name to get around on Earth. We see the medic Una right here. She's also introduced, along with kind of his arch nemesis, Colonel Yon-Rogg, who I believe if you've seen the movie, you know who that's played by. I mean, you kind of know where the story goes. Now, they bring back characters like the Sentry from the Fantastic Four, and eventually, because like I said, he falls in love with Earth, he kind of turns his back on the Kree Empire, so they see that as a slap to the face, like, hey, we're not going to put up with that. You are going to be executed. So in here, you're going to see the fight with the Super Skrull. Again, this stuff right here now, Roy Thomas takes over with issue... Or no, he takes over after Stan Lee introduced him. So Roy, the boy Thomas, Gene the Dean Colan, I love that, takes over immediately after Stan Lee's introduction of the character. So they kick off the main series, and again, it's him fighting off the Kree warriors that are coming to try to take over Earth. In here, you're going to see appearances by not just the Submariner, but also Ronan the Accuser, characters that have appeared before, or the Supreme Intelligence, in the pages of the Fantastic Four, including the return of Namor. And I believe it was because at the time, Gene Colan was actually, or before this, he was drawing the character of Namor. Eventually, Roy Thomas and Gene Colan would go on to other things, and Arnold Drake takes over the book. Now, Arnold Drake comes from the pages of the Distinguished Competition again, but he was working on Doom Patrol over there. So he brings his own flair to the book, and we have Don Heck now on artwork. And the stories in here, I can see why they needed a revamp. They're okay. A little too predictable and formulaic. Here's Ronan the Accuser. And Ronan also kind of uses and manipulates the character of Mar-Vell. And he's like, hey, we need to go and kick the crap out of the Supreme Intelligence because they want to kill you. And Mar-Vell's like, yeah, all right, that sounds like a good plan. Now, the interesting origin of the word Marvel in this story is that when he's on Earth, they misheard his name. And by they, I mean humanity. We misheard his name. They said Mar-Vell, but we heard Marvel, hence the name Captain Mar-Vell. Now, in here, there's another first appearance. As a matter of fact, this character will play a long-lasting legacy for the name Mar-Vell, or Marvel, sorry. And that is Carol Danvers. She makes her first appearance through these early pages. So, we do get a new race right here. That, what are these guys? The Akko, I think, is what their name. That are mortal enemies with the Kree. So, let's see. It should see the Akon. Don Heck again supplying the artwork, and Arnold Drake. Now that there is a love triangle between Captain Mar-Vell and Carol Danvers and Medic Una. Now, this unfortunately doesn't have the happiest of endings for anybody, but And then eventually Arnold Drake leaves the book, Gary Friedrich takes over, and this is when Marvel decides the sales are really bad, we're about to cancel this. We might give it a chance, give the Roy Thomas a chance, and by then Roy Thomas and Gil Kane decided to come back to the book. Gary Friedrich, Frank Springer supplying the artwork for this one. He went on to do Transformers, but here he is fighting Iron Man because of miscommunication. Beautiful artwork in some of these. There's Tom Sutton, man. He draws some beautiful stuff in this issue right here. And this is issue number 15. There's a lot of beautiful splash pages in here. I love the colors. And it's a little trippy. It's a little Ditko-ish, a little Jack Kirby-ish. Maybe some of the Kirby crackle, but that is just awesome. And eventually Archie Goodwin takes over the book, but Roy Thomas made him a deal. This is issue number 16. Roy Thomas is like, hey, Gil Kane and I kind of want to take over that book again to kind of give it a brand new life. You mind doing something else? And Archie, being the good sport that he was like, yeah, all right, I'll go do something else. So this is what I meant when I said that there's like 3 different eras of Captain Marvel in this omnibus. Not because of the cancellations. Well, one of them will be. But because he changes in this. And this last few pages are kind of done by Roy Thomas, like the way that he wanted it to go. He changes the character of Captain Marvel, not just in look, but also in powers and limitations. So, starting with issue number 16, letter pages, by the way, all collected in here. Starting with issue number 16, beautiful cover by Gil Kane. Gil Kane and Roy Thomas take over the book. And now, it changes the character of Captain Marvel escaping from the Kree and being out there lost in space with Medic Una. I swear that's what they call her, Medic Una. Not just Una for some reason. And Carol Danvers and hanging out with those folks. He changes instead to a character much like the character of Billy Batson and Captain Marvel at DC Comics. When Billy Batson yells Shazam, he becomes this guy that can fight evil and has superpower and super strength. And they can't coexist in the same place. Well, the same thing happens here, except the young man in this is Rick Jones. That's right. Superhero sidekick to Captain America and the Incredible Hulk is now about to forever change in the fact that he has to wear these bands. So Captain Marvel is stuck in the negative zone because of things that happened in the previous issue. And he can only come out of the negative zone when Rick Jones touches the bands, and I think he said, does he say fantastic? I don't know if he says something. He just touches the bands, and he becomes Captain Marvel. Now, this is Mar-Vell coming out of the negative zone, and then Rick Jones is stuck in the negative zone. And of course, this has limitations. I think it's for a period of about 3 hours that he can stay here. And that's what this focuses on. His powers have changed. He's a lot more powerful than the Kree warrior that we saw at the beginning. And sadly, because of the sales of the previous issues, the comic got canceled with issue number 19. So Martin later on, the publisher, decided, okay, wait, let's bring it back, because we saw the sales of issues 17, 18, and 19. They're better. So 6 months later, the same creative team, Roy Thomas and Gil Kane, came back to tell the continuing story of music performing Rick Jones, who gets a colonel type of, Elvis is colonel, by the way, music manager, while still fighting crime for 3 hours, or letting Mar-Vell come to Earth for 3 hours because they can't coexist. There's a fight with the Hulk because, hey, why not bring the Hulk in? Now, again, because of sales, here's an introduction by Roy Thomas explaining all of this, by the way, in a beautiful worded way and just memory that, for some reason, I don't know how the man does it, just remembers everything. So again, canceled after issue 21. And it comes back with issue 22. I love the joke on the cover, the hero who wouldn't die, which is exactly the joke that they use for issue number 20. Let me see if I can find it really quick. The hero who wouldn't die, and that's a joke on the fact that, let's see here. Yeah, the hero who wouldn't die. That they're not going to stop publishing it. They're going to keep going with it. This time around, though, Roy Thomas and Gil Kane had moved on to other things, including becoming editor-in-chief because Stan Lee had moved on to becoming publisher and president of Marvel Comics. So, yeah, it's crazy to think about this era of Marvel. Jerry Conway steps in for an issue. We get Marv Wolfman coming in before he was doing Teen Titans, around the time he fell in love with Tomb of Dracula. But he stays with Wayne Boring for a little while, again telling the story of Rick Jones and Mar-Vell. And then we get a big introduction. Now, the important thing, between issues 21 and 22, 2 years passed. So that's nothing small. And in those 2 years, we see Captain Mar-Vell being used elsewhere. Most importantly, in the Kree-Skrull War, which took place in the Avengers issues. And they play a big part in all of this. And I understand why they weren't included in here, and I understand why they included issue 55. But with issue 55, we get the first appearance of Drax, the Blood Brothers, and a more menacing character that I've talked about over and over on the channel, and that is Thanos. And you can see a lot of inspiration from Jack Kirby's Fourth World. And the introduction by, oh my gosh, Roy Thomas goes into detail about who inspired who. Yeah, you could say Jim Starlin was inspired by the artwork of Jack Kirby, but Jack himself was inspired by several other artists. So I thought that was really cool. So this is a young Jim Starlin coming in and wanting to write the story of Captain Mar-Vell after doing that issue of Iron Man, but wasn't as easy at first to become a writer. So Mike Friedrich helped tell the story, co-plotted, but eventually he would start getting co-plotting duties, or at least co-plotting credits right here. So script, Mike Friedrich. Now we have Jim Starlin. And here are the inks by Dave Cockrum. I love that. Now the character is going to go through one more change. And that all happens, again, Thanos playing a big part in this. And it's in this issue right here, issue number 29, where he gets said change. So, actually, it says right here, don't dare miss the big change. The most cosmic superhero of all. And in this issue, this is where, I believe this is the second appearance of this character. What is his name? Eon. And Eon makes Captain Mar-Vell the protector of the cosmic era, or the cosmic side of Marvel. So he becomes protector of the universe. And he changes him. His appearance, his mask is a little bit different, and of course, that golden yellow hair. Now, this is the way that I remember Captain Mar-Vell, because I didn't read the original Captain Mar-Vell stuff until years later. I didn't even know that he had that much of an origin. I knew of Captain Mar-Vell because of the Kree-Skrull War, and because of that Marvel graphic novel. So that was all new to me. This is a big, long saga, too, by the way. Jim Starlin was just, like, doing a lot of things that were different, that unheard of at the time, because most of the story arcs at Marvel were one issue, and then in the late 60s, they started doing, like, 2 issues, because they saw the success of some of these stories, like The Coming of Galactus being a 2-parter. So they stuck around to like 2 issues at most, and then they started to do bigger and bigger storylines, like Kree-Skrull War, which is definitely more than 2 issues. So Roy Thomas, being editor of the magazine now, of this particular magazine, saw what Jim Starlin was shooting for. So it's a cool Thanos War saga right here, and it is a long game that he's playing. Now, we won't talk about the final issues, but I did want to show the little part here from Not Brand Ech, which shows his first appearance, drawn by Gene Colan, and taking panels from his first appearance. So if you go back and compare it to the first issue that he appears in right here. So if you go back to the beginning of the omnibus with that first appearance of him, it is funny to go back and compare it to this, because it's both creators just parodying themselves with little Easter eggs there, including Easter eggs from DC right there with the, well, I guess more Fawcett type of characters. Speaking of Fawcett, there's a couple of little Easter eggs that appear through here, like Dr. Savannah and was it Dr. Mind, I think? That are, of course, a throwback to that Fawcett era. Alright, and then we get some amazing penciled art by Gene Colan. And I love Gene Colan's artwork. The older I get, the more I've appreciated it. But I noticed that, let's see, this is the Marvel's Heroes. Let's look at the difference when it's inked. Paul Raymond did the inks, but you could tell the differences. It's like you lose that little bit of Gene Colan that's in there when you get all these shadows. Not to say that he's a bad inker, but there are definitely people that work better together as finishers and embellishers. Another piece by Gene Colan. And the other thing could have been that Gene Colan was not a fan of Captain Marvel's costume. He hated the costume so much, so he wasn't a fan of drawing it. So he was ready to move on. All right. Let's keep going here. The non-spoilery side of things, for the people that wanted to skip the spoiler part, and then we'll talk about the build of the book, of course. And now we get some cover layouts and original art right there, including original Gil Kane and Dan Atkins artwork. This right here is an original piece of Thanos, and it's the way that he wanted to use him. And I thought it was interesting. This is where Roy Thomas stepped in and said, hey, how about we beef him up? We change him a little bit. And he was like, okay, because it's like almost looks like Metron from the DC universe. Because, like I said, he was a big fan of The Fourth World by Jack Kirby. So he was definitely inspired by that look. So I think it was the right call to beef Thanos up. Looking more like Darkseid, less than Metron. And here's some original art again. Jim Starlin. Then we get to the reprints right here. I am going to skip a couple of pages. So these are the reprints of the classic Captain Marvel stories, and this is the way that I read them originally. The Life of Captain Marvel. I am going to skip a couple of pages, though, because some of it spoils some things. They added original artwork sometimes to the stories to kind of fatten them up. Yeah, I think I'll skip this and then go into the trade paperback introduction by Al Milgrom, who will eventually, I think, end up taking over the book with Steve Englehart. So yes, this would get a volume 2 if you're curious about that. Like if there's enough material for a volume 2. Because the series went all the way to issue number 62. Here's the last page. We'll look at the binding really quick and talk about the paper quality. It got canceled with issue number 62. And then, of course, Carol got her own series with Miss Marvel at the time. But you could also include Marvel Spotlight 1 through 4 in issue number 8, which kind of wraps up a storyline. Here's what the eye looks like. Not much of an eye, honestly. Luckily, there's not that many spread pages through here. Printed at the iMac printer. But, of course, you would also have to include the Marvel graphic novel number 1. As far as the paper quality, it reminds me of the Daredevil book that I did an overview of yesterday, the reprint. So, it's as thin as that, and you do see some art bleeding from the opposite page, like so. And there are a lot of whites through the beginning here before he takes off for that cosmic adventure. So you can see word bubbles and some frames coming through. Not as thin as the JMS Spider-Man reprint or the Conan by Kurt Busiek, which I think are the ones with the thinnest paper. This book, when I was reading it, it did have that weird ink finish to it, or the colors maybe. Not that they come off, but you have like it almost feels like dirt on your book. But that's just the way the iMac printer prints things. Not with every one. Some of them are a little bit different. So not just white pages, but really light pages. You can see some of the art come through. Not that. That's actually a piece of the frame right there. But here we go. And I always like to point out these things because I know that it bothers some people. Not everybody, but it's part of the overview, and I have to be as thorough as possible. But yes. Let me see if I can find one more page. I love these pictures right here by Tom Sutton. He was great. I wish he had stayed longer on the book. That is a badass piece right there. Let me see. Let's go back to that. To about 2/3 of the book, where you can see Captain Marvel come through on the opposite side. Did want to find a double-page spread that didn't have a spoiler on it. So even though there aren't that many spread pages found through here, I just wanted to show one. So you do get a little bit of a gutter curve. Not really much loss considering that lack of an eye down there. But actually that's pretty impressive, like I said, because there's not much of an eye down there. And spine has been stretched. Alright, one more picture. Just because I think it's so freaking awesome and the amount of detail that Jim Starlin was doing back then. Holy crap, that's awesome. But that's it. That's it. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this book, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Join me later on today when I take an advanced look at the reprint of the Dr. Aphra Omnibus. And that will be a quick video because I've already done an advanced overview a couple of years ago of the original printing, but mainly talking about the differences in the books and the paper quality, and if that one misprinted page is still misprinted in the new printing. But in the comments down below, let me know what you think about this particular stories in here, what you think about this omnibus, if you're going to pick it up, if you have the Marvel Masterworks, if you remember these stories as they were coming out. I love hearing stories of people in the comments section sharing when they were kids, or when they were teenagers, or when they first heard about Captain Mar-Vell. And who your favorite Captain Mar-Vell is. At heart, for me, it will always be Janice Fell. I was a big fan of that character. And followed by a close second by Monica Rambeau. So, let me know who your Captain Mar-Vell was growing up, or now, even if you got into comics because of the movies. Yeah, we'd love to know all those comments. Smash that like button, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications. I think that's it for me. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.